This is Sunday Live with Janine Perrett.
Hello, welcome to the show. I'm Janine Perrett. Great to have your company tonight. And no doubt over the last few days you've been watching with interest what's happening in the US. The mad general election over there makes our lot look sensible, doesn't it? Well, maybe. Who better to discuss the implications of that and how the alliance with Australia is looking than former ambassador to the US for Australia, Kim Beazley, who'll be joining me in just a moment. Later in the show, we'll be running excerpts of a speech to the Australian-American Leadership Dialogue by Admiral Mike Rogers. So a bit of a theme today. And when I say that their election makes our politicians look good, I mean, you know, it's a joke over there that it's being run like a reality show and we're all sniggering and giggling over here like it had never happened here. But then, of course, as if we would ever elect as a politician a narcissistic, publicity-seeking billionaire blowhard. Oh, actually, we did. That's right, it's Clive Palmer. But then we argue, oh, but we woke up to him, we got rid of him. Well, to be fair, he's only going through financial difficulties for the first time. Donald Trump's, I think, 6 times he's faced bankruptcy. But no. As if we ever bring those people back. Pauline Hanson, anyone? No, we should not think this is a joke, that it's just a bad reality show, amusing as it is to watch, because while we don't vote there and while it's a long way away, it's not like Brexit, where really, if Great Britain wants to become Little England, it's not going to affect us or the rest of the world that much, really. But in the US, it will. That alliance is very important. And if you elect a clown, as we're seeing with NATO, they must be very worried in Europe at the moment. We don't want to have anything that could destabilise security or the economy. And that's what we're facing. So we need to be very careful when we think this is amusing. Because as the T-shirt I saw in Cleveland this week read, just because it's hilarious is not a reason to elect someone President of the United States. On that note, we're going to go to the news of the day with Sharon McKenzie.
Thank you very much, Janine. It is very nice to have you back. Well, firstly, vigils have been held for the 9 people killed in a mass shooting in Munich. Police are investigating whether the gunman specifically targeted young victims during the shooting rampage before killing himself. He allegedly posted a message online to lure people to the fast food restaurant that he'd targeted. Authorities are also following up on reports that Sonboli felt bullied by his peers at school and warned he would kill his classmates. The gunman had no links to Islamic State, but material on mass shootings was found in his home. 2 suicide bombings in the Afghan capital Kabul have killed 80 people and injured more than 230 others. Islamic State has claimed responsibility. The country's president has declared a day of national mourning, vowing to take revenge against the culprits. Liberal MP Tim Wilson says it will be challenging for the government to facilitate a plebiscite on same-sex marriage before 2017. Speaking to Sky News, Mr Wilson says it's also important the issue is dealt with as soon as possible to allow the government to focus on budget repair.
The plebiscite will either happen at the end of this year or very early next year. I know the Attorney-General and the Prime Minister have said their intention was to host it this year. The reality is that because the Parliament is not getting back until the 30th of August, to pass legislation and then have a vote of the public before the end of this year is going to be challenging, but then it should be dealt with very early on in 2017, because that is what is in the interest of the government, that is what is in the interest of the public, and so we can move on from this issue.
Mr Wilson says if a plebiscite is unsuccessful, it will not be presented to the Parliament in this term, but the issue will inevitably come up again.
I can't see that some other political parties are going to abandon their position. Of course, the coalition, I suspect, would honour that to that election, and then the policy they took to the next election would be, well, everybody has a free vote. Tony Abbott set the standard on this, which is he said that we would have a plebiscite, but the last parliament was the last parliament that people would be bound on. So any future parliament after that would, of course, come down to the individual conscience.
A driver caught using his mobile phone behind the wheel has helped Sydney police uncover almost 90 kilograms of the drug ice with a street value of $45 million. Officers say they found some of the drugs inside the man's car after they pulled him over in Haymarket. The incident sparked police raids at properties across Sydney, with more ice seized and 2 other arrests charged.
police are still investigating the roles of all these people, and they're obviously going to be before the court, so I can't comment too much on their role. However, it appears that the 3 people involved have been involved in, police were alleged, a drug network, an organised crime drug network, especially the fact that over $45 million worth of drugs have been seized. That equates to 900,000 street deals that's been prevented from hitting the streets.
A man has been stabbed to death at a dinner party at Lithgow, west of the New South Wales Blue Mountains. The 35-year-old was found dead at the scene by police and paramedics at about 9:30 last night. A 27-year-old man from Padstow Heights in Sydney has been charged with murder and has been refused bail. Protests have been held in Brisbane, Melbourne and Hobart, calling on other states to follow New South Wales' lead and ban greyhound racing nationally. The rallies were part of an international March for the Murdered Million event. Victoria's racing minister has already ruled out shutting down the industry. Janine's raring to go, so we'll have more news coming up just a little bit later for you.
I certainly am. Thanks, Sharon. Now, as I said, we're going to have a bit of a theme on the US tonight, but also looking at the implications for Australia. And who better to put it in perspective than our most recent ambassador to the US, the Australian ambassador to the US. He's only been back a few months. Mr. Kim Beazley, former deputy leader, of course, of the Labor Party. He's also now co-chair of the Australian-American Leadership Dialogue, was in Washington only last week. Welcome to this show, Mr. Beazley.
Lovely to see you again, Janine. Last time, I think, was in Washington.
It was. Now, since then, it's got very interesting. But before we get to that, I know you were back. You've only been back a couple of months, but I saw you on the election coverage for our election on the night on Channel 9. I'm just wondering, after all those years away, what you made of our election result and how things have changed, and just give us your summary as a former leader of the Labor Party and what we've seen, where we're going.
Well, I must admit I forgot Kim Beazley's Rule 1. And Kim Beazley's Rule 1 in Australian politics is always believe the polls. And had I believed the polls, I would not have been surprised by the extent to which the Labor Party caught the government up. I was very impressed with Bill Shorten's campaign, very impressed with the way in which he got the sorts of issues that and the policies actually answered many of the insecurities that Australians face. And given that those insecurities are powering elements of the American political system at the moment, I was perhaps a little more sensitive to them than many here, and interested in the way in which they played out in the poll.
I'm going to ask you about those parallels, but first I'm going to ask you if you were surprised by the re-emergence of Pauline Hanson, given you had a front row seat for her first political incarnation last century.
Well, no, I wasn't surprised, because the change in the voting system in the Senate was tailor-made for her, including the fact that it was conducted against the background of a double dissolution. Previously, her problem had been that while she would have a number of votes that would take her, certainly in a double dissolution, close to a quota, she got no preferences from anyone. In the system that now operates, that process has largely been eliminated, so getting in close to a quota means that you will get elected. Previously, that was not enough. You needed the preferences to get you there. The mathematical formula here are quite complex and not fully understood by me, but one did think as the election proceeded and one got a better understanding, or I got a better understanding of the way in which the Senate would be counted, it looked pretty obvious to me, really from the get-go, that she was going to win a seat or two.
Comparisons have been made with the rise of Donald Trump in the US and the right-wing backlash here, the re-emergence of Pauline Hanson. As you said, you've experienced both. You've seen it. Are there parallels?
Not really. Not in her vote. The pitch that she has made on the Muslim issue is, of course, there in the American political system. But what's driving Trump's current success is not that. It's been the fate, if you might say, of the white working class in the United States over the last 30 years. They've had no real wage rises. There is no political party which has really pitched to their needs. The Republican Party exploited their sentiment in numerous elections, but thought that they'd be satisfied simply with their conservative social agenda addressed by Republican candidates. In fact, what they want from their point of view is economic relief. The Republicans did not offer them that. Though his campaign is completely spurious in this area, the positions that Donald Trump adopted exactly pitched to their points. Pauline Hanson got 4% of the Australian national vote. Trump has taken over a major political party.
As I said, you were at the Australian-American Leadership Dialogue in Washington only about 10 days ago. I noticed, and I was there too, I noticed almost, not confusion, but a bit of dismay from both sides of the political spectrum there about the rise of Donald Trump, because so few thought he would get this far. I know you said in a speech last week that you still think Hillary Clinton can win, but how big a threat is he? I mean, it's a two-horse race. Is there still a chance he might win? We shouldn't just discount him.
Well, his threat is the policies and positions he's adopting. You know, Ronald Reagan became famous for his statement, "Morning in America." He was an open-hearted, friendly, very decent man. You could have characterised Trump's speech last week as midnight in America. You know, a world surrounded by threatening, dangerous folk, which he wants to drag, and he wants to drag the US back into a shell confronting that, and in the process trashing the post-World War II order of liberal internationalism and American leadership established by successive US presidents, Democrat and Republican. He presented to the American people a set of policies which will be disastrous for the United States and particularly damaging to our region. One of the things you must always take into account, and I think this in the end will defeat him, is that a politician like Trump means what he says. You see too many people wandering around the place saying, well, of course, you know, once he gets into office, reality will bite him and all the rest of it. Well, reality will bite him, but that does not mean that he is going to retreat. He is not a fellow who believes that he ought to retreat from positions he adopts. He's an ultimate narcissist, and he thinks that the world needs to revolve to his position, and he will function on that basis for a very long time.
Is it a relief to be able to speak out now that you're not an ambassador and having to worry about the diplomacy of it? I mean, do you think it's incumbent on a number of people who aren't in government to say, look, this is a threat to Australia and the world?
Yeah, look, it is useful to be able to make those points. I would quite like to be there during the course of this year, because it's an opportunity. It would be an opportunity to talk to your friends in the United States and to present to them arguments that they might utilise in the course of the discussions which are going to flow over the next few months. I still think Hillary will win. I mean, if you take a look at the change in the American electorate, these things are notable. When Bill Clinton was elected, 51% of Americans identified themselves as white Protestants. That figure's now 31%. Bill Clinton's electorate was 87% white. This election, which if Hillary Clinton wins, it'll be Hillary Clinton's electorate, and it'll be less than 70% white. Trump is not doing at all well amongst other ethnic groups. But it's difficult to see that the one that he has won over is going to do anything other than vote for him. That vote, however, of itself is not decisive.
You mentioned the isolationism, and crucial to Australia, obviously, is the pivot we've seen to Asia. There was some fear with the Brexit vote and what's happening in Europe that any new president on either side might be forced to pivot back to Europe. Is that a worry to you?
The United States is capable of chewing gum and walking at the same time. It's capable of actually dealing with things in the Middle East, dealing with things in Europe and dealing with things in Asia. The pivot to Asia, though, has been critical to us and also critical to the United States. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is very important to economic progress in the region. You've got a relationship with China which is basically handled quite well has been handled quite well by the Obama administration. And you have in Japan and South Korea, nations which need their security constantly attended to. You walk out on all of that, start a trade war with China, you'll find very quickly an economic crisis throughout our region, and a security crisis in all probability too, which will be a challenge for the Australian political leadership were that to occur.
I'm going to get to the TPP and those economic issues in a moment, but just on the security side and Europe, his comments on NATO last week, virtually saying it's going to be a user pay system and that he wouldn't necessarily defend anyone if Russia were to get aggressive. There's stories today in the US media about some close links between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin. Are you worried that the Trump campaign is emboldening Vladimir Putin?
Well, Trump seems never to have seen an authoritarian he didn't love. And, you know, his commentary, his comments about Putin have been quite extraordinary. You know, the Republicans really got into Hillary and into Obama when, in the early phases of their administration, they sought a rebalancing or if you like, a review or a reform of the relationship they had with Russia. They criticised them for unreality in the way in which they approached that, and indeed you could not see that the relationship really chalked up many successes under the administration or the time when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. They adjusted accordingly, of course. But it's an extraordinary thing when Republican conventions previous, those criticisms were being offered, and now the Republicans have endorsed a fellow who sees great virtue, not simply in Putin the man, but Putin the approach.
Is the danger that even if Hillary Clinton is elected, as you say, you're hopeful, that this push, that rise of the angry middle-aged male or older male that you talk about, the white male, is there a danger that they are going to, any populism is going to have to be picked up by the Democratic side? And we'll certainly see it in the Congress still, won't we, which is virtually dysfunctional at the moment.
Well, you know, the extraordinary thing is that Trump is actually running not only not on racial issues or migration issues, and that's a very big exception, but on the economic issues and the security issues, he is running to the left of Bernie Sanders, let alone the left of Hillary Clinton. I mean, that's there is no Republican in this contest. As I said to some of my Republican friends when I was over there, this is the first election since 1856 when there has not, in fact, been a Republican candidate. And so he seized the party, and a vast number of knowing Republicans absented themselves from that process, and one or two turned up, like Ted Cruz, to try to make that point. But the baying, howling delegates were inspired to persist, even though previously they had howled for other views, howling for that one. I think they're very confused. I had a conversation with a prominent Republican former Southern governor, I remember 18 months ago, in which he asked me what I thought of the Republican Party, and I said, look, you've become the party of the white working class. Your problem is you think that all that means is adopting social attitudes. The trouble for you is that you do not represent their economic interests, and sooner or later a populist candidate is going to come over into your processes and rip the base of your party apart. But I didn't think it would be Trump. He is, given his background, truly the most unlikely harbinger of that, or purveyor of that position. I mean, if anyone is a member of the elite, if anyone has got away with extraordinary economic performances at the expense of small business and others, it's been Donald Trump over the years, a most unworthy vessel of a populist campaign, yet it is an indication of the power of that level of concern amongst, particularly amongst the white working class in the United States, that should be so. One thing that will not happen is that if these policies that he pursues are ever put in place, that they will in any way find their economic circumstances ameliorated. Because fundamentally they're founded on lies or founded on miscued analysis of what would actually resolve their problems. And therefore, disappointment, they'd be bound to disappointment. But the rest of us would probably be bound to a very unstable globe.
I'm going to talk about economic matters, in particular the TPP. We have to take a break first, so stick with us. We'll be back in just a minute. Kim Beazley. As I said, we will be back in just a minute to talk more about the implications of what's happening in the US for Australia. Hi, Kim, can you hear me? I can't hear him. His mic's not up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Thanks for this.
Now?
We're
Excellent.
going to do another
No, not at all.
10 minutes. Oh, look, I think it's good. I'm really pushing this because, as I said at the outset, we're going to stop thinking we're kind of treating it a little bit as, oh, it's a funny thing they're doing over there, but it's got far more implications. So, you know, I'm going to run the Mike Rogers speech afterwards. I've got a copy of it. Yes,
yeah.
So that'll be good. So my last question I'll just ask you about him and the speech, so as a bit of a...
OK, no, that's good.
Yeah, no, because I thought it was great. I love the story about the 26-year-old Australian giving him the briefing, so...
Yeah.
So they gave me that. I went to Cleveland for a day, 2 days.
Oh, did
my
you?
Goodness. I hadn't got accreditation. I just wanted to get a feel for it. As I said on camera on my show on Friday, I said I was going to give up smoking when I got to the US. After 2 days in Cleveland, I decided there's no problem, you know, really. Why would you worry about prolonging your life when you've witnessed that? It is terrifying.
It's extraordinary.
Oh, it was awful.
But you know, the interesting thing is this, that, yeah, he won all those primaries and the like, but most of those delegates that you saw, those baying for Hillary's blood and cheering this mad populism, they're actually Republican regulars because you have the vote, but the vote doesn't elect delegates. The delegates are elected by state party conferences.
Exactly, which is what Cruz was trying to do to try and get them on side, because even though they'd voted.
Yeah.
But what I saw was interesting. I didn't think there was necessarily that much enthusiasm for Donald Trump. The only thing that united them was the hatred of Hillary. That was far more overpowering than we love Trump.
And how obscenely put. I've never seen a conference of any party in any electoral process that demanded from the floor, from the stage, her jailing, and from the floor, her execution.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
It's just been appalling.
Some of those T-shirts and badges I saw, I just could not believe them. I mean, they were unbelievable. So we'll just go back and we'll go on, as I said, we'll mainly go with the TPP next. But thank you for this. I do appreciate it.
All
right. Guys, what time will the break finish? We can close the mics now to Perth. I just need to talk to the... Welcome back. I'm here in discussion with the former Australian ambassador to the US, Kim Beazley, who's over in Perth. Welcome back, Ms Beazley. Or should I say Ambassador Beazley? Is it like the US? Do you still get the title when you're back?
No, not amongst us.
Oh, okay.
We don't do that sort of thing. We're egalitarian, real egalitarians.
Well, your successor, Joe Hockey, did say while he was there, he was surprised at how much obviously national security takes up a lot of your time when you're negotiating with the Hill, but a lot of time at the moment is talking about that Trade-Pacific Partnership and that last-ditch effort to try and get it up, even though both presidential candidates have virtually ruled it out. Now, there seemed to be a feeling in the room that there was still a slim hope or a hope that it could get up. Why do you think so, given that both candidates have said no? And as we've talked about, the whole populism, the whole mood is against these trade deals. How could a lame duck session just ignore that whole push?
Look, Joe's doing a terrific job in the Congress. He's really focused not so much on national security issues since he's been there. He's really done a heavy lobby job in the Congress, and the fact that the US trade representative turned up at our conference, I think, was to some degree a tribute to that. So he understands that the TPP is very much in American interest and in ours and in the regions. You know, there's a whole lot of baloney talked about it. And because what is talked about the TPP is baloney, it has a chance of carrying. For example, take manufacturing industry. The current real rate of protection in the United States for manufacturing industry is 1.5%. After the TPP goes through, guess what? It'll be 1.5%. The United States has given it the office, so to speak, on trade matters and has become the importer of last resort in the Asian region, which has driven Asian prosperity and is absolutely critical to it, but it's also driven American prosperity. Everybody knows that on the Republican side in Congress. All but about 30 or 40 of the Republican members believe the TPP should be done. Now, I don't think they'd do it if Donald Trump was elected. That'd be too much in the face of the successful, in quotation marks, Republican candidate. On the other hand, if Hillary is elected, different considerations will apply. If she is elected, I would give it a 50-50 chance of going through in the lame duck. And I think you would have found, as you talked around your friends and folk on the conference floor, there'd be quite a few of that view.
Yes, and I presume that her announcement over the weekend that she's picked Governor Kaine as her running mate, he's very pro the TPP. Does that help or does that make you more confident?
So is the vice presidential candidate selected by Trump. Most governors of American states, be they Democrats or Republicans, favour the TPP. Kaine is now a senator, but he was a governor, and they understand very well that these trade agreements work enormously to the benefit of their constituents. There are some people who have missed out on jobs as industry has changed, but industry has changed not so much as a product of trade agreements, but as a product of technological change. The US is now going through a massive manufacturing revival, and they are competitive with China in manufacturing industry. So a few operations in China have started to come back to the United States. But it's built around robotisation. So the jobs that come from it are not jobs on the factory floor, they're jobs in logistics and support service industries. And they are massively benefiting from it. All the governors know that. Kaine knows that. The majority of Republicans in Congress know that. The Democrats do not support TPP in majority. The progressive wing, so-called, of the Democratic Party is now more powerful than it's ever been before. It's part of the ideological polarisation of American politics now. But there's enough Democrats of the view of Kaine to see it through if there is a chance of it being voted on in a lame duck session with Hillary as a president.
Well,
I think...
I just want to interrupt you there, just because I've always been pro-free trade. I was actually in Punta del Este 30 years ago when Australia led the world in this push for it. Multilateral trade, we know the benefits. However, having been in the US and seeing how hard this push is and what the political mood is, would it really be the end of the world if TPP didn't go through? If you think about it, we don't have it at the moment. Is it worth pushing all this political capital